Ferrari faced a tougher weekend than usual in Baku. From Friday's practice sessions, which seemed to put Ferrari in contention for victory, we ended up with a Ferrari finishing 8th and 9th in Sunday's race. But be careful, there was a problem with Leclerc's power unit that stopped him. And in today's video, we're going to look in detail at what the problem is. Let's hear the statements from Leclerc, Hamilton and Vasseur. We also need to see what Andrea Stella said about Lando Norris and why he settled for a 7th position. And let's see if Red Bull with Verstappen can get back in the fight for the World Championship. Before we start, please leave a supportive like, subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any Formula 1 and Ferrari themed videos. That said, let's get started right away. Ferrari managed to throw away another race weekend. In Baku, we expected a reaction, but the SF25 once again showed embarrassing limits, especially in terms of straight line power. Qualifying was already disastrous. Hamilton out in Q2, Leclerc crashed in Q3. In the race, a comeback was needed, but despite a decent start, Ferrari never had the tools to really make an impact. Hamilton chose hard tires, Leclerc medium tires, two opposite approaches. Lewis wanted to extend the stint, while Charles wanted to push immediately. In fact, at the start, Hamilton gained 2 positions despite the slower tire. Piastri crashes into the wall almost immediately. At the restart, we saw Leclerc make a great overtaking move on Lando Norris in turn 1 and start chasing. But the first problems already emerged here. The SF25 doesn't keep the tires in the right operating window and especially lacks top speed. On lap 16, Leclerc pits to fit the hard tires, returns 11th behind Antonelli, and from there starts lapping without highlights. He reaches Lawson but can't pass him, again due to the usual power unit deficit and also because of the very thin rear wing flap. Norris, although slower, eventually overtakes him again. Hamilton tries to exploit the situation with the pit stop, goes behind Charles, but overtakes him immediately with a team order. It wasn't a scandalous move because Lewis was clearly faster. In the end, however, neither of the 2 Ferrari drivers managed to make an impact. Hamilton remains stuck behind the train with Norris, Tsunoda and Lawson. Leclerc collapses and can't defend himself. The result is mediocre placements and another missed opportunity with another Sunday where Ferrari showed its limits. And so my opinion is clear, this is not about bad luck or incidents. The problem is structural. The Ferrari SF25 lacks straight line power, poorly manages the hybrid and suffers from chronic tire issues. Vasseur keeps saying high concentration, avoid mistakes, but the truth is that even without mistakes, this car is not enough. The hybrid cut on the straight is the perfect snapshot. Ferrari can't exploit what it has. In this Formula 1, you can't afford it. Baku should have been the ideal circuit to maximize. Instead, it turned into yet another humiliation. If this is the second force in the World Championship, then we're in bad shape. And the truth is that the furious ones are right to be furious because seeing 2 champions like Hamilton and even Leclerc struggle to stay afloat is unacceptable. But let's hear in detail the statements of Charles Leclerc because they have sparked much discussion. In fact, during the first stint, Leclerc's Ferrari didn't have full power. The power unit wasn't running at full capacity for several laps, leaving Leclerc unable to attack those ahead. Charles himself said over the radio to think more about defending than attacking. Then, almost magically, the power unit started working again, but not at 100%. And when you're missing horsepower on the longest straight of the championship, in Baku, you're finished. The DRS doesn't help, the overboost doesn't make a difference, and so you remain stuck. Leclerc said that winning a race in 2025 will be very difficult. In short, he too has lost hope. And this is the most serious news of all, because if Ferrari's leading driver, one who has always believed in the project, starts to give up mentally, it means that even inside the box, pessimism is in the air. Then there's the episode with Hamilton. In fact, in the second stint, Leclerc had given way to his teammate with fresher tires on team orders, and Lewis tried to catch up with the group ahead but couldn't pass Lawson, Tsunoda and Norris. At the end, he tried to return the position to Charles, but did so without conviction, practically holding on until the finish line. The result is that Hamilton finished 8th and Leclerc 9th, and so Hamilton ended up ahead of Leclerc, and Charles dismissed the matter coldly. I'm not interested. For an 8th place, it's not worth discussing. Leclerc is right to take the blame for qualifying because he made a mistake. He made an error at the most important moment, namely in Q3. But we can't reduce the Baku disaster to that mistake. The truth is that Ferrari can't maximize the potential of the car. The blanket is always too short, so either the power unit isn't at maximum power or you have a rear wing that's too unloaded. There's always a problem that limits Ferrari. Charles' words carry weight. If he, who usually always stands up and takes responsibility, says that winning will be very difficult, we can say it loud and clear. This Ferrari can't win in 2025, We know that even Leclerc is generally very optimistic about this, but this time I saw him really demoralized. We also need to hear how Lewis Hamilton has expressed himself, especially since he shared his opinion on the issue of giving the position back to Leclerc and has also publicly apologized. Lewis tried to look at the positives, saying he had a good race pace, felt more comfortable with the car compared to other times, but admits that the Ferrari is still nervous under braking, and he doesn't feel 100% confident when attacking. But the real problem is something else. Red Bull has won 2 races in a row, even on tracks that were supposed to favor Ferrari. McLaren has been ahead all year, and Ferrari not only doesn't win, but hasn't even been on the podium since before the summer break. Hamilton said it bluntly. We've made progress, but we can't turn them into results. Others bring updates, we focus on 2026. This refers to the updates brought by Red Bull at Monza on Verstappen's floor, and at Baku on Tsunoda's floor. I'd give anything for an upgrade now, but it won't come. We just have to optimize better what we have. And here lies the bitter truth. Hamilton is right, Ferrari isn't stagnant. But the improvements aren't enough because others are growing faster. Baku proves it. A car that is the best on Friday and 2 days later fights for 8th place. Well, there's a problem of execution, strategy, management, but above all, there's a problem of vision. If they are really already thinking about 2026 at Maranello, it means they too have lost faith in this season. And for the fans, it's devastating because Red Bull and McLaren are racing. Mercedes is now second in the Constructors' Championship, and Ferrari is content with analyzing mistakes and looking ahead. The reality is that 8th and 9th place can never be an acceptable result for Ferrari. And if the most successful driver says that others grow and win and we don't, then the signal is very clear. This SF25 is not enough and 2025 risks being already over. And if we think about it, in the race on lap 5, George Russell was exactly in the same position as Charles Leclerc. Yet Russell finished second, Leclerc 9th. So what was the real difference between Ferrari and Mercedes in the Baku race? Charles spoke of a power unit problem for some laps that limited him. Vasseur also confirmed it. We had an engine problem. Not serious, but enough to prevent him from overtaking on the straight. And even with this problem, the reality is that Ferrari was behind Norris at the start and remained behind Norris at the end. The famous DRS train conditioned the race, sure, but Russell with the Mercedes showed that if you have real performance, you can attack and overtake other drivers. He overtook Tsunoda, then with a very long overcut until lap 39, he also passed Sainz, Lawson and Antonelli. The difference between a competitive car and one that struggles is all here. We can say it clearly. Ferrari paid for Leclerc's mistake on Saturday, and this is true. It paid for a questionable choice to start with medium tires instead of hard ones, and did not manage the race weekend in the best way. Vasseur admitted it. We made progress after Spa, but we qualified in 10th and 12th position here in Baku. And Vasseur admitted it. We made progress after Monza, but we qualified here in Baku in 10th and 12th position. We need to understand where we went wrong in execution, and this is the key. Ferrari not only lacks pure performance, but continues to make execution errors. And when you combine a non-winning car, strategic errors, and drivers who make mistakes, the result is inevitable. 8th and 9th place, while rivals climb the podium. And here we come to the real point. This car has never been winning and never will be. Because after months and months of the championship with tracks of all kinds, high and low temperatures, different tires, rain, dry, city and permanent circuits, the result is always the same. Something is always missing. The SF25 might perhaps nail a perfect weekend with clean qualifying, impeccable strategy, and maybe a bit of luck. Then yes, it might reach the podium or even win. But basically, it's not a winning car, and this is the most serious problem because Ferrari cannot afford to rely on isolated miracles. Excuses are no longer needed. It's not enough to say it's the fault of qualifying or the DRS train. In Baku, it was seen that Mercedes in colder track conditions made a remarkable comeback. Ferrari did not. The limit is not only technical but cultural. Continuing to tell themselves that it would have been enough to qualify better is the wrong path. The fan understands it because they look at the results and see that for months this car hasn't been on the podium. And I say it clearly, the list of excuses is over. Either Maranello finds the courage to really change method and philosophy, or 2025 will be remembered as yet another year of regrets. And the real fear is that 2026, the year of the great regulatory reset, risks arriving with Ferrari still behind if the course is not changed now. But what went wrong in detail in the final episode when Hamilton had to give the position back to Leclerc? How did Leclerc take it in the post-race interviews? Hamilton on the final straight lifted his foot and even braked, but it was too late. Under the checkered flag, he passed ahead by just 0.4. After the race, he apologized, calling it a misjudgment on his part. For Leclerc, however, the issue is not just 8th or 9th place. He said it clearly. For today, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't have been happier if I had finished 8th. But there are rules between us that weren't respected today. In the future, when we're fighting for more important positions, I hope things be different. And it's a diplomatic message, but with a hint of warning. Because it's true, today we were talking about 8th and 9th place, positions that should be irrelevant for Ferrari. But if tomorrow we have to fight for a podium or a victory, internal agreements must truly matter. And it's not just a matter of personal respect between two drivers. It's a matter of team rules. Because if you don't apply them when you're down, you risk not being able to apply them even when you're ahead. In my opinion, Leclerc is right to ask for clarity, because this episode shows two problems. The first is a Ferrari that argues over a pointless detail, the 8th place, instead of thinking about how to get back to fighting at the front. And the second is that within the box, the rules seem fluid, and in Formula 1, this approach is dangerous. Hamilton apologized, but the point isn't being careless. The point is that Ferrari must have a clear method respected by everyone, and not at the last lap. Because if it doesn't do it now, when it matters little, it risks exploding when it really counts. And the paradox is precisely this. People are getting heated over an 8th place. This is the snapshot of Ferrari's current crisis. Let's also hear Vasseur's words on the Leclerc episode and the lack of horsepower from the power unit, the hybrid part, and also on 2026 because he commented on the engineer market. Ferrari's team principal said that the pace was there, especially on Friday. But we lost time in qualifying. Saturday, we should have done better. Instead, we started behind Norris and stayed there. In the race, we got stuck in traffic and had no more room for maneuver. And it's a clear admission. Ferrari continues not to put together the weekend. Unlike McLaren, Red Bull and Mercedes, who, when it really counts, managed to maximize the race weekend. Vasseur also confirmed what Leclerc had already hinted at. Charles had a problem with energy recovery. It wasn't consistent, but in the last 20 laps, we were missing a couple of kilowatts and therefore a bit of horsepower. We weren't losing much from the engine, but it wasn't enough to overtake Lawson. In short, once again, Ferrari found itself powerless on the straights, unable to fully exploit its power unit. And this is where the real problem lies. Vasseur says that the gap between Friday and Saturday is the same as always, and that it's not a matter of different mappings compared to others. He adds that since Spa, we've made a step forward, but then talks about mistakes, wrong choices, and lack of opportunism. Translated, Ferrari never manages to put the pieces together. Strong on Friday, disappeared on Saturday, and blocked on Sunday. To the question about personnel leaving Maranello, Vasseur responded sharply. It's a joke. We've lost some people, but we've recruited 60 from other teams. I'm not worried. I'm convinced I have the right team to win in 2026. But here's the problem. Continuing to shift focus to the future while the present is burning. Fans surely want reassurance about 2026, but they want to see results now too. And so Vasseur is wrong in perspective. It's not enough to say the pace was there on Friday. It's not enough to say the fault lies with qualifying. In Baku, Russell with Mercedes showed that if you really have the performance, you can come back even from mid-pack. Ferrari, on the other hand, remains stuck. The real problem isn't just the car, but the team culture. There's always talk of potential, but never of concrete results. And meanwhile, the championship slips away. The truth is simple. Ferrari isn't opportunistic. When there is an opportunity to capitalize, it fails. When an extra push is needed, it doesn't find it. And if you keep throwing away weekends, no matter how much you recruit for 2026, you'll always be behind those who know how to win today. And let's move from one team principal to another, because I want you to hear Andrea Stella's statements, McLaren's team principal, who spoke out about Norris's performance, also on Oscar Piastri's disastrous weekend. Let's listen together. Max Verstappen won in Baku and sent a clear message. Despite the points gap, he has no intention of giving up. In the last 3 Grands Prix, he recovered 44 points from Norris and 28 points from Piastri. McLaren remains the car to beat, but now its drivers are starting to see the world champion in their mirrors. Let's start with Piastri's disaster. The Australian's weekend was sheer madness. At the start, he committed a jump start, then stalled on the grid, losing all positions. He tried to recover on the first lap, but like on Saturday in qualifying, he ended up in the wall. A shocking KO that opened the door for Norris. Only Lando didn't take advantage of it. He finished 7th at the finish line behind Tsunoda and Lawson, opponents that should be beatable on paper. Norris preferred not to take risks, but in doing so, he wasted a golden opportunity. Meanwhile, Verstappen secured his 4th win of the season and 6th pole. And Red Bull showed they're not out of the game at all. So is Max's comeback in the championship really possible? The gap from Piastri is still huge, 69 points with 199 points up for grabs between races and sprints. McLaren has favorable tracks on its side, but the Dutchman has nothing to lose. And so Singapore will be the turning point. and McLaren holds the championship in its hands, but the real opponent isn't Verstappen, it's Norris and Piastri. If they don't manage the internal rivalry well, they'll give Max an unexpected opportunity. And regarding Norris's performance, who only finished 7th in Baku, Andrea Stella has spoken out. The pit stop is one of the most crucial areas in Formula 1, and in Baku, Norris's pit stop was very slow at 4.1 seconds due to a problem with the front right tire, TRA. The result was that Norris rejoined in 8th place behind Leclerc and Lawson, and only in the final managed to regain the position from the Monegasque. And it's not an isolated case, because already in Monza, there was a slow pit stop of 5.9 seconds, and Andrea Stella added, "The races are increasingly compact, and every 10th counts. We need to improve not only in execution, but especially in hardware. Today, there are still too many interactions between operator and equipment, and the process needs to be made simpler and more natural for the pit stop crew." Stella defended Norris. He did the best he could with what he had. No one in his place could have achieved more. The responsibility lies with the team, because with a fast pit stop, he could have attacked Lawson. And in my opinion, McLaren must react immediately. You can't dominate in race pace and then be beaten by a pit stop error. It's a detail, but it's exactly the details that decide the championships. Norris is already 22 points behind Piastri. Verstappen is getting closer, and in these conditions, every mistake becomes a mountain. McLaren today is favored for the title, but with such a pit stop, it risks transforming from favorite to announced defeat. And what allowed Max Verstappen to emerge in Baku and claim his second consecutive victory by dominating the race? There are 4 elements that favored the Red Bull RB21 in Baku. The first element is the low downforce, the perfect compromise. Red Bull found the ideal setup on a very difficult track like Baku, where speed on the straight is needed, but also grip in the slow sections. The Red Bull RB21 hit the compromise and was fast on the straight and stable in the 90-degree corners. McLaren, on the other hand, loses too much at the rear when the wing is unloaded. Second point, Max showcased his talent on Saturday in qualifying, managed the tires, and made an incredible lap when it mattered, and when conditions weren't 100% stable. Third point, tire degradation was practically zero, and this clearly advantaged Verstappen, but especially Red Bull, which struggles more on tracks with high tire degradation. In this case, degradation was very low, so Red Bull had an actual advantage. Fourth point, track temperature. The asphalt was around 25 degrees, and it's the perfect condition for the Red Bull RB21 because it can put more energy into the tires compared to others, and thus works better on cold tracks or when temperatures drop. And this is the same weak point that, on the other hand, put Ferrari in crisis and benefited Red Bull and also Mercedes. We must obviously also talk about Carlos Sainz's podium. Historic podium, the first in Williams, marking a new era for the Spanish driver. The key was certainly the second place in qualifying ahead of cars that are theoretically faster. Historically, Williams has always struggled on the single lap, but this time Sainz made the difference, turning a weak point into a decisive weapon. In the race, managed like a calculator, and as he usually does, he gained margin over Lawson, and especially over the Mercedes in the first part. The key moment came at the end. Antonelli with the hard tire was faster, but Sainz always kept him out of the DRS zone. He managed that 2.5 second advantage like a veteran without giving the slightest chance of attack. And so came the first podium in Williams. This podium is a very strong signal to the paddock because Sainz, let go by Ferrari, is proving he still has a lot to give. Williams, often forgotten, has found in his talent and experience the way to become a protagonist again. Toto Wolff defends Kimi Antonelli, and we know he will remain in Mercedes for his future, so the Russell-Sainz pair in Mercedes won't happen. But on one side, we have a Kimi Antonelli who is continuing to grow and is having good weekends now, and on the other, we have a Sainz who confirmed an excellent performance in Williams. And let's remember that Williams is focusing everything on 2026, so we'll see how it presents itself in the future. Let me know in the comments your opinion on all the topics we've covered in the video. As always, I remind you to leave a like, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on Formula 1 and Ferrari themes. That's all from Rastro. See you in the next video.